You woke up smaller than you are. Not in the body, in the size of the self that opened its eyes. Last night you fell asleep pressed flat against a single problem. The conversation that has to happen, the number that has to move, the decision you have been carrying for a week without setting down, and while you slept, that worry did not leave. It waited by the bed, and the moment you stirred it climbed back on first, before the coffee, before the light, before you had a single clear thought of your own. This is about the size of the self that runs your morning, because the worried self is real, but it is small. It can only see the one thing it is afraid of. And the larger self, the one that can hold the whole of your life and not just its sharpest edge, is also awake right now. The only question is which one you feed first. Walt Whitman knew the feeling of waking up larger than the night before. He spent his life insisting that a person is bigger than the small accounting they make of themselves. Not a vague positivity, something more stubborn than that. He had watched people shrink to fit their fears, their jobs, their grief, and he refused to do it. In Song of the Open Road, written in 1856, he put it in a line that lands like a sunrise. I am larger, better than I thought. I did not know I held so much goodness. Read that the way he meant it, not as a boast, as a discovery. He is surprised. He went to bed thinking he was one size, and he woke and found there was more of him than the worry had let him see. That is the actual morning event under the alarm and the to-do list. You are larger than you thought. You did not know you held so much. And the fear that shrank you last night was never the measure of you. It was just the last thing you looked at before the lights went out. But here is what decides it. The larger self does not seize the controls automatically. The small, worried self is faster. It is already there, already talking the instant you wake. If you do nothing on purpose, it wins by default, and you spend the whole first hour as the smallest version of yourself, reacting, dreading, defending. The larger self has to be fed first, deliberately, before the small one finishes its argument. William James understood exactly how that feeding works and how literal it is. In his great book on the mind, in the chapter on habit, he wrote a sentence that should hang over every morning. We are spinning our own fates, good or evil, and never to be undone. Every smallest stroke of virtue or of vice leaves its never so little scar. He meant it physically. To James, every act you take is a vote, casting your nervous system toward the person you are becoming, and nothing you do is neutral. So the first acts of the morning are not small. They are the opening votes of the day, scored into you before the world has said a word. Get up the moment you decide to, and you have voted for the larger self. Lie there negotiating with the fear, and you have voted for the small one. Either way, James says, the stroke is recorded and never to be undone. The morning is not a warm-up, it is the day's first ballot. And there is a simple way to put a thumb on that scale, before willpower even enters it. Andrew Huberman, who studies how the brain wakes, describes a lever almost too plain to trust. Get sunlight into your eyes early. The light sets the cortisol and starts the body's clock, so the alert, capable self comes online on purpose rather than by accident. You are not waiting to feel large. You are walking to the window and giving the larger self its signal to arrive. That is the whole maneuver. Light, then motion, then one real act. Whitman's discovery made on purpose. You feed the self you want to run the day before the self you fell asleep with can climb back into the chair. Here is what shifts when you feed the larger self first. You no longer let the worst thought set your size. The fear you woke with is a real item on a real list, but it is one item, and it has no right to define the person handling it. When you greet the day at full height, the hard conversation is still hard, but it is now a thing you are bigger than, not a thing you are trapped inside. You no longer spend your freshest hour as your smallest self. That first hour has the cleanest energy you will own all day. Hand it to the worried self and it burns the whole supply on dread that solves nothing. Hand it to the larger self and the same hour builds something, because the larger self can act while the small self can only fret. And you no longer wait to feel ready before you stand up tall. Whitman did not feel larger and then become it. He moved, he walked the open road, and the largeness was discovered in the moving. James would tell you the same in colder words. The act comes first, and the self forms around the act, stroke by stroke, scar by scar, never to be undone. You do not summon the bigger self and then begin. You begin, and that is how the bigger self arrives. You woke up smaller than you are. You do not have to stay that size. So decide it now, while the morning is still yours to shape. I am larger than the fear I fell asleep with, and I wake into my full size. I feed the larger self first with light and motion before the small self takes the chair. I get sunlight into my eyes early and let my body wake on purpose, not by accident. I treat my first acts as votes, and I cast them for the person I am becoming. I let the hard thing stay hard while I meet it at full height. I spend my freshest hour building, not dreading. I do not wait to feel large, I stand up and I become it. That is the morning, not a smaller problem, a larger you meeting it. If this set your size for the day, stay with this channel. Every morning, one disciplined hour to begin at full height. And tonight, when the same day comes back around to its close, the largeness turns to letting go. Tonight you give back what was never yours, the roles you wore all day and mistook for your whole self. The way Epictetus taught that we only ever borrow our parts and must hand them back without complaint. And the way Carl Jung mapped the masks we wear so well we forget to take them off. Come back this evening to set the costume down and find what is underneath. Begin disciplined, end reflective. Now go meet the day at your full size. Go.